Welcome to the New Monks. This podcast is dedicated to those of us on the journey of evolution. Through these episodes, we will dive into the lives of individual people and discover what they have learnt and how they have handled their growth. We believe that we all have wisdom to be shared with each other and can learn from listening to each other's stories. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and Apple Podcasts, Spotify. If you feel like leaving us a review and sharing the love, that would be greatly appreciated. So this is just a heads up because, there's a lot of information that is coming to light at the moment, and through these episodes, each person is going to share a different side of that for them. Now, this isn't to say that every single thing that is shared here is going to be 100% accurate. It's just not where we are right now. It's just not the case of the unraveling and the disclosures that are being revealed to us. Obviously, things are always changing, and in one moment something can be so real and so true, and the next moment is completely shifted and changed into something else. This is the journey of evolution. This is the journey of ascension that we are going through right now. So this is just an invitation that your discernment is really, really important. As always, as usual, please take what resonates and leave the rest. Thank you. Hi, and welcome back to the New Monks podcast. I am Jay Muller, and today I am speaking to Ritika from India. She's been speaking out these past 2-3 years, and that's how I came across her page on Instagram. And she's just really used that platform to portray her perspective and how she views the world. In this episode, she really is speaking us through her awakening process and how it all unfolded. In her early 20s, she was out living the good life and not really concerned about the political and social impacts on what was taking place in the world. And then she studied in Italy, which, as she describes, really helped her to analyze her thinking and question things in a different way. And it was her older brother, that sparked a line of curiosity, which then led her down some rabbit holes, finding out about the children and that darkness in the world, which really brought her into a real deep state of sadness, which obviously is natural. And I feel like this is something that we will all will come to terms with when we really want to know the truth and we find it out, because it is dark and it's ugly and it's something that we really have to figure out how to comprehend. And she describes that what helped her was learning about philosophy and the Bhagavad Gita and these wider perspectives that help us to interpret and understand our world. So from that moment forward, and from this moment forward, now she's found a way to be a lot more stable within the knowing of what's taking place. And to find a way to be a bit more grounded, I guess, rather than feeling like you have to save the world. Which again, I think is something that a lot of people can probably resonate to, especially when you know so much of what's going on. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Please do like, leave a comment, subscribe. Thank you. So hi Ritika, thank you so much for being here and willing to share your story. I'm quite intrigued because I've just come across what you've been sharing on Instagram. And I loved the videos that you did, but it seemed a bit like almost poetry that
Mm-hmm.
you'd
I
written
mean,
yourself, right?
yeah, firstly, thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to be here. And it's so amazing that we sort of like have this crazy connection of knowing each other from almost
Yeah.
another world.
Yes.
So I started writing poetry earlier in 2021. And there was never any like steadfast decision as to, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to start writing poetry or whatever. The idea was just I was on an Instagram sabbatical for 2 years prior to that, where I wasn't posting anything, and I'd like deleted all of my friends and everyone from my social circle off of my Instagram, because I just didn't want to be in anyone's business anymore. And people were quite offended by it, is what I heard initially. But honestly, I didn't care, because I was just on my own mission. And what I did is I just followed all of the pages, pages about consciousness, pages about, openly discussing political discourse, and so like a variety of things about just like vibrational frequencies, and just like this. I opened myself up to an entire world of like holistic health and education and nutrition, and just a vast variety of topics that I was super interested in. And I decided that I was going to use Instagram with complete intent. And I was very absolute about it. Like, there was no bullshit on my feed at all. It was a beautiful time. Can't say it. I mean, it was 2 years long. And then when I realized, so I came back to India after the first wave of the pandemic. And after, I mean, I'm not going to call it a pandemic, because it wasn't a pandemic. Sometimes I say pandemic by mistake, and I'm like, hold on,
Wait,
that was a slip of the
yeah,
tongue. That's not the right word.
yeah.
But yeah, let's call it what it is. So when I came back after the first wave, and they started, with the second wave propaganda, I was here, and I realized that all of the people that I loved so dearly around me were very taken by the agenda, which is, I mean, I don't place any blame, because in India we live in very familial structures. So we're all living with either like our parents or our grandparents, or somebody in the family that could potentially be um, vulnerable to an illness, like how as they expressed COVID was. So everybody, was went and took the vaccine without even thinking about it, and there was no critical analysis the of the information that was being disseminated, which I found really crazy, because my first response to information, and this has not always been the case, this has obviously been it was a long time coming, and it took a lot of deprogramming and a lot of deconditioning to get to this point. But when I look at information, or I'm exposed to anything, I first research all the possibilities, like within the spectrum of our reality, and then I internalize that information to figure out, what the information in my DNA or within the collective is actually telling me. And I think that that is a very special response that I learned over time, but it's just obviously not something that um, was happening in like on a very large scale. It was happening with people individually in like pockets of the world, and those people started magnetizing towards each other, which was incredible. Which is also my story about how I came in touch with all of these amazing people, including yourself, when I came back to India. And the reason that I came back to social media was because I finally felt like I had a voice and I had something to
Mm.
say. So after consuming information for 2 years straight and not saying anything at all, I just wanted to be quiet and assimilate all of it and internalize all of it. And after 2 years of doing that and doing a wide variety of research on so many topics, I decided, you know what, there's something that I need to give back now, and I'm ready for it.
Mm.
And weirdly enough, it started expressing itself as poetry, and
Mm.
it was very strange. So I would only have these poetic thoughts just before I slept or just as I woke up. So in
Mm.
my
Yeah.
theta delta brainwave state. And very early on, I started, to sort of think whether I was like, are these my thoughts, or are these thoughts that are being passed on to me? Is this independently what I've been thinking? Is this a product of my own conditioning and programming, or
Mm.
the information that I've been accumulating, or is it something interdimensional? And honestly, I'm still to figure out those answers, because sometimes I feel like as soon as I have a thought, I try to break it down, and I'm like, is this my own? And I'm not entirely sure it always is. So
Mm.
it's been fascinating.
That's a really good question. Yeah, thank you for that intro. It's funny that you said about Instagram, because I did the same thing. I removed everyone I was following. I took a little break, same thing. But anyway, before we dive in, we'll come to touch on everything you spoke about. If we can just take a few deep breaths in and out.
Sure.
And then just tell us how you're feeling right now.
I feel good. I feel really good. I feel like I'm finally in a place where I don't feel like the burden of the entire planet is on my shoulders, because I know that there was a feeling of that initially, during the entire upheaval, when we were like trying to speak to people and convince them. And the idea was to bring forth information that would help people to save our like friends and family and everybody that was, just in the deep end of what was going on. And I feel like that was a very traumatizing time for me and for a lot of people around me who had sort of who were privy to this spectrum of information that wasn't actually uh, encapsulated in anything that the mainstream media was putting out there. And I think that that feeling has now subsided. That feeling of like, why don't people get it? Why aren't people getting it? Like, what can I do to help? And this, almost it's the space in between like extreme energy and apathy, because on one level you really want to give it everything you have and
Mhm.
save the world, and on the other end of the spectrum, you know that it's just not possible. So you're somewhere in this like twilight zone, which never feels nice. Obviously, it just feels like you're in limbo. And I think that now I'm feeling very good about the fact that I'm out of that situation. I'm feeling very empowered in my own understanding of what's happening around me, and also um, in just my path and my purpose. And I think that the more I'm recognizing what that is, I think the more unconvoluted everything around me is getting. There's just so much clarity suddenly within the
Mm.
past 6 months that has been, I think, integral to my own development.
Mm. I love that. I feel like that's something I've definitely noticed as well. There's the further you go, the more clarity there is. At one time,
Mm-hmm.
it can be super confusing, you know. But what,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that a lot of people can probably connect with what you said there, feeling like this, need to save the world kind of thing, and then getting a bit lost in that, I guess. What is it? What shifted for you to come to this place now, where you are now?
I mean, so I think it was the introduction of a lot of philosophy into my life, like a lot of Eastern philosophy that has helped me um, understand my own situation and understand what's happening in the world from a more macrocosmic perspective. Because when you're looking at things, it's just so immediate to your reality,
Mm.
and it becomes very which is why it feels so real, and it feels so like the urgency is so high. But I feel like when you zoom out and you look at things from a broader perspective, you're able to then analyze that, you know what, there's probably nothing I can do about the entire circle, but I can start at the point, and that point is me. And my whole perspective on what change is um, transformed into the change needing to be within and not without.
Oof.
And I think the idea of, like this, the past, I would say 8 months especially, has been very rigorous in terms of working on myself and working on my own shortcomings, uncovering deep shadows that have been hidden, over and over again until they're at the surface, embracing myself, embracing those shadows, embracing the light and the dark aspect of, your entire nature. So yeah, I think that's been astronomical to my development and to my evolution, even in terms of how I approach people and how I approach situations, or how I want to write about them, or how I want to express myself. I think that's been great, because I read somewhere that, because my entire justification for all of my behavior ever since I was a child actually was that, well, I'm telling the truth. So what's the problem with that? And I
Mm.
think that, and this has always been something that's been a part of me, even when I was younger, it was always, no, but I'm telling the truth. So why should there be a problem with that? And I read something which changed my reality completely, which said, truth without compassion is cruelty.
Mm.
And reading that really grounded me. And there was another level of like dissolution of the ego. And it was like, you know what? You may be giving people information that you've arrived at, but firstly, that isn't necessarily the truth, because truth, although there is an objective truth, within that objective truth, there's a multiplicity of subjective truths as well. So I think understanding that and becoming all right with that was very, very important. And I think that, you know, grasping at that perspective has made it much easier to then dispel information or perspective, or, whatever within, like, whatever you want to call it,
Mm.
knowledge. I think yeah, grasping at that perspective made it very easy to be very passionate and very empathetic in dealing with people and dealing with this whole upheaval that humanity is, that the collective is going through currently.
So was that a recent discovery?
I think it was recent. I feel like it was a long time coming, because so lately I've been experiencing this and talking about this with people that I know quite a lot, which is the feedback loop, which is the loop of your conscience, what I call it. And that feedback loop has become really, really quick lately. So as we're
Mm.
ascending, as our own consciousness is ascending from a 3D to a 5D reality, or that the frequency is changing or rising, all of the things that you could get away with in the past, you could say something mean, or like be sort of misaligned with yourself and get away with it, and it would feel all right. And you think about it later and sort of introspect, and it still didn't make a real dent. I think now that's been amplified to a point that you cannot ignore it. Like
Mhm.
when I do something or I say something that's misaligned with who I need to be, or the frequency that I need to bring to this planet, it's immediate. Like
Mm.
there's a feedback loop immediately. Like my neurons are going crazy, and they're just like, that's not the path you're on. Find
Mm.
yourself, reconfigure where you need to be, because where you need to be is very clear in when you ground
Mm.
within yourself. You're very clear about who you want to be and who you need to be today.
Mm.
And I think that just like snapping back to that reality as much as you
Mm.
can has been
Yeah,
very beneficial.
like realign to the mission. What
Hmm.
I like what you
Hmm.
said about the philosophy though. It really helped you, I guess, to speak more compassionately, and especially Eastern philosophy, because I feel like when you have that, then you get the bigger picture. And like you said, there is
Hmm.
a truth, but it's multidimensional. So you've got to in order to be compassionate as well, you have to be able to see that. And I feel like this is a
Absolutely.
huge thing, because with a lot of people who've been communicating, this is a whole lesson for us, is to, whatever this passion, the anger, whatever it is, it's like it's such an intricate thing to how we are communicating.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I feel like Eastern philosophy is very holistic, and that's the reason that I love it and I gravitate towards it very easily. Is even the way in which we describe nature, like the way in which the Gita describes nature,
Mm.
is we call it Prakriti. And when we think about nature through Western ideology or through Western scientific three-dimensional perspective, we think of the four elements, which is earth, fire, wind, water. In Eastern philosophy, nature or Prakriti comprises of not only earth, fire, wind, water, also ether, mind, intellect, and the sense of I. And this is nature. So when you think about nature, when you think about don't litter, like, the micro perspectives within how we should treat our environment, I think the most unfortunate thing is that we experience a separation from this
Yeah.
nature that's outside of us. But actually, the nature within and the nature without is one. We're one with this planet, and we're one consciousness, and it's not separate. And I think the closer we come to that understanding, it will radically transform our interactions with our environment, with our surroundings, with each other, circumstantially, within, like, from
Mhm.
people to social strata to any paradigm of divide that we experience will disintegrate when we start
Mm.
viewing the world and ourselves as one.
Definitely, I think so. That's an amazing distinction with the way it's described in the Bhagavad Gita. Like, it makes so much sense as well. It's like, yeah, that's how
Mhm.
it's incorporated. That's how we are incorporated into the design, you know?
Absolutely, yeah.
So I would love to hear about your journey before this huge transformation that's going on right now, because I feel like most people who have come to this awareness, they've had like a previous little journey, you know?
hmm I feel like it was another life, when I
Wow.
think about it, it feels crazy. I know that the last couple of years at least feel real, because I think they are they're closer to who I am now than I've ever been. But the time before that, like, say 5 years ago, 7 years ago, like when I probably met you when I was 21 years old and I was being crazy when I was in London, I feel like it just feels like another life.
Yeah.
And a lot of so I spoke to someone also on a podcast, a very dear friend, who asked me, and he was like, have you always been like this? And I said, well, absolutely not. I know that there was always a seed within me as a child, which I recognized, which I think even my parents recognized very early on, where I had a lot of quite existential questions. Like, I would ask questions like, because in India you live in a society where poverty is very uh, is very immediate in your surroundings. It's not something you rarely see. It's something you live with and interact with all the time. So when I saw a poor child on the road, and I was in my car with my mom, I would ask her questions like, why am I here, and why is that child there? What have I done to deserve this life and to be here? And
Mm.
what has that child done to be there? So I know that there was always an intrinsic understanding or realization of the fact that something is gravely wrong with our world. The fact that there are countries in the West that live in complete opulence or have lived in complete opulence. And then there's um, and such an opposing reality in the East, where there's so many cultures that live in destitute poverty.
Mm.
And it always made me feel like there's just something not right about that. Uh it feels misshapen, like it feels uneven.
Mm.
And this asymmetry confused me and made me ask a lot of questions growing up. But I feel like, at some point, I stopped asking those questions and I was more consumed by the cultural narrative of what was happening around me. Because suddenly those questions didn't matter, and it was more important to be cool. And it was more important, like, be seen or be known or be, whatever sort of things that you deal with when you're a teenager and things like that. And in the effort of being that, I remember I was quite like a fat child when I was maybe from the ages of like 14 to 16. And I struggled with a pretty serious eating disorder post that. And when I think about what that came from, it was 100% cultural conditioning. You know, we grew up watching these incredibly beautiful, at that time we thought that was, you know, the ideal of beauty, these incredibly beautiful, societally beautiful models that were ramrod thin and like super skinny, just skin and bones. And we were so conditioned by that idea of aesthetic, that we weren't able to understand anything outside of it. Like growing up, although I'm from India, where we're like probably 85% of the population is dark skinned or wheat skinned. We hated being dark. We hated being dusky. And we were grown up told that if we were dark or dusky, it was a disgusting thing. So this was also something that, you know, I had to very intentionally break away from. And I'm so glad that we're in a world today where we're, you know, exposed to this completely different side of the fashion industry and different side of information, which has also been bastardized in its own way. Unfortunately, we'll get there. But I do think that the beautiful part of it is that people are learning to appreciate all sorts of people and all sorts of features and all kinds of beauty, you know, because there is so many different types of beauty, and beauty isn't only skin deep. It goes far, 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 far more deeper than that. And there's so many layers that need to be peeled off before you're able to understand that as a child and as a teenager, you know. And I think that my struggle with the eating disorder and my struggle with atheism, I call it a struggle because it was a struggle. I used to listen to a lot of metal music growing up, and I was like a crazy metalhead. And I was so consumed by the um, demonic cool narrative. You know, there's a rhetoric in culture where like, and where it's not like true anarchy, it's like demonic anarchy or like fascism or whatever they want to call it. That being cool and that being, you know, I don't know, I feel like it's been portrayed in culture a lot, and it sort of sent me down this very strange atheist route. But I think I bounced back from that pretty quickly. I became agnostic because I
Do you
realized
mean
actually,
the gothic kind of scene?
oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Not just gothic. I feel like
Yeah.
it is just it is Satanism expressing itself through music and through vibration and basically conditioning your mind. That's now when I
Wow,
break it
yeah.
down. Yeah. And I think that unfortunately, what we discount so heavily, like Tesla, for example, said that if you really want to understand the universe, you think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration, because that is what everything is. You know, we think of everything from such a physical um, dimension because our science is limited to that dimension, but actually there's multiple dimensions, and the dimension that all of the work actually happens that then manifests in the physical dimension is the dimension where energy, frequency, and vibration are, you know, the key players of this dimension. So I think that if we're able to understand the world through, you know, the lens of cymatics, which is how sound or vibration expresses itself as matter. And they do all these very beautiful experiments where they have these grains of sand, you know, on the trays, and then they feed it a frequency, and then based on the frequencies, they make these incredible cymatic patterns, which look like sacred geometry. And that principle is a fundamental principle that expresses itself all through nature in everything, including like atoms and protons, electrons, like from the smallest part of nature to the largest part of nature, they all work on these fundamentals. And I think it's unfortunate that these are not the things that we've been taught when we were children, you know, which is why, I mean, education is just such a sham, unfortunately, because I think that if we were a generation that was exposed to this kind of understanding of the universe. Like, math is the language of the universe. Growing up, I despised it. I thought of myself as like, I kept convincing my parents I have dyscalculia because I just did not want to calculate anything. And I was like, why the hell should I be learning like algebra and trigonometry and all of these like nonsensical things that I'm never going to use in my life? But actually, I feel like if I was taught math with the perspective of it being the language of the universe through like sacred geometry, and all of these incredible multidimensional modalities, I think that as a child, I would have been so much more fascinated by it, because they're still fascinating. Like, they're tripped out even now. So I think that there's just so much work to be done, in all of these, to break down all of these systems and like recalibrate them.
Yeah, there is totally. I feel like, I mean, yeah, but it's like we're just not there yet anyway, where we know even the knowledge about how it all fits together. But
Mm-hmm.
I hear what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
But I love what you said before here as well. Like, as a child, you always felt like something just was wrong. And I think that so many, because when you're a child, that I feel like that's when that kind of appears, because you're just here, you don't really know what's going on, but it just doesn't make sense, right? And I just feel
Mm-hmm.
like so many of us have that connection, and a lot of the time people just forget about it and then continue with their life. But to
Yeah.
actually have that and to keep questioning, to deepening the question, like, and to know and to live that, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
This is totally not right, you know?
It doesn't make any sense. Nothing
Yeah.
makes any sense. Like, the way, if you think about any of our systems, they're so deeply flawed, whether it's health or, the medical industry or farming, food, education, science, research. Like, they're so heavily totalitarian and so dogmatic and so incorrect, unfortunately, that you're spreading this like almost religious fundamentalism through these different institutions, through science. It's scientific fundamentalism, or through health, or through pharma, or through education, or through history, whatever it is. It's unfortunate, because I feel like a lot of people, from what I've noticed, are able to separate these things and are able to understand the building blocks of them in separation again. So they're able to understand, what, maybe our education is compromised. Maybe our
Mm.
food is compromised as well. Our government seems like it's compromised. And they're able to see like all of the different parts of the puzzle, but they're not able to piece them together. And I think the reason for that is that it just requires a lot of your own conviction and your own time and your own research. And, you have to be willing to go down several rabbit holes to get to the bottom of all of these, these questions. Um,
Yeah, so that's so true, because the thing is, to piece it all together is really important. And
Absolutely.
yeah, but it's true. Not, I guess it's part of the conditioning, really. Like, don't
Mm,
question, just take
mm.
what you're told, you know?
Yeah, I mean, actually, a very I read something very fascinating recently, which was the introduction of. So we know that our food is heavily compromised, and I always knew why, in terms of, oh, they want to keep us sick so that we can be, customers for the pharmaceutical industry, because the same people that own the agrochemical industries also own the pharma industries, and there's complete synergy there. So it's like a whole, it's like this demonic cycle, as I like to call it. But recently, I read about high fructose corn syrup. And high fructose corn syrup is obviously one of the most prevalent sugar substitute, not sugar, concentrated
Mm.
sugar substitutes in any generic food found in, especially in America, but
Yeah,
like all
yeah.
over the West, also anything that's imported into any of our countries as well. And it's a growing fad here as well. And I know that there is some amount of like reaction to it now, but we've been consuming these products for at decades, at least, from like what, the second industrial revolution, for a
Mm.
long time. And I was reading about the fact that like overconsumption of high fructose corn syrup reduces the blood going to your prefrontal cortex, which is basically the part of the brain that helps you make decisions and helps you critically analyze
Oh, wow.
situations,
Yeah.
and it sends blood to the amygdala, which is a reptilian brain, which is in charge of, your fight or flight and response to fear. So they're actually not just conditioning you to be sick through your food, they're also conditioning you to be scared and to be apathetic and to be helpless and to not be able to use your brain through your food, which is just wild to me.
Yeah, man. It's everywhere. It's everywhere.
It's
So,
everywhere.
yeah, so why did you come to London?
Initially,
Yeah.
I came to escape. I just wanted to run away. I just wanted to leave India. I didn't want to be here anymore. I just thought that, I mean, I don't know. I just had like wheels on my feet and I just wanted to leave. And it was this like, there was this, I don't know, there was like this magnetic pull towards London. And it was not something that happened forever. It was very nascent when I took to it. And I came to study fashion. So I went to LCF and I did like a fashion design course while I was there. So it was great. I really, really enjoyed my time in London. Actually, it'll always be my second home because I went back to live there as well. Very different from India culturally, but yeah, it'll always be a special place for me.
So when did you come back to live here?
I came back to live there in 2018, and I
Okay.
was there until 2018 or 2019. I was there until
Uh,
2022,
okay.
20. Sorry.
And then basically, so when you first came here, you did a bit of traveling after that, right?
Yeah. So when I first was there, I was there for probably like a year and a half, nearly 2 years. And then I went to New York. I went to circus school in New York, actually, which is
Wow.
just bizarre. Yeah.
Wow.
So I always, growing up, I'd always known that I challenged myself mentally, but I never felt like I'd actually challenged myself physically enough because I was always like sort of like never really committed to something, in terms of exercise, always like doing things, leaving them, more like, like picking up these fads and like over, getting rid of them whenever I wanted to. And so I was like, I really want to do something and focus my attention on something proper. And I was very fascinated. I was super fascinated by circus just because it's like it's such a mystical world. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to actually go learn I'm going to learn the aerial silks. And I came there and I was learning from this company called Urban Circus NYC for also a year and a half. I got to perform a little bit while I was in New York as well, which was very fun. So yeah, it was great. And then I moved on to Italy, to Florence, to do my master's in fashion trend forecasting, which was by far the best educational course I've ever done in my life. It
Mm.
was a combination of philosophy, sociology, anthropology, psychology, marketing,
Wow.
and fashion. It was incredible. And it was the first time in my life that an like an educational institution pushed me to critically analyze information. And I think the
Wow.
time it was amazing. And the time of being there revolutionized how I thought and how I perceived information post that.
Wow, that's amazing. It does what it's supposed to do sometimes. So do you think, sorry, you say
No,
something.
it was very interesting because I never experienced that while I was in India at all.
Mhm.
And then in London as well, when I was in LCF, I think maybe the course was very focused on fashion specifically. So there
Yeah.
wasn't that much deviation. But it was very fascinating that Europe, because I was in Italy when I, came upon this like different style of teaching. It was very fascinating to me that Europe was taught in that way, and it started actually making me think about why people within European countries are much more free in the way that they think, and adhere to the concept of freedom much more, uh, in a much more unequivocal manner than we as Indians do. Because unfortunately, I think a lot of people, at least from my social strata, we're a population that can be very easily subjugated, which is very very unfortunate, but at least this is what I've seen in my, immediate reality. And it just made me gauge the difference between like the European youth and the Indian youth or the Asian
Mm,
youth, for
mm,
example. And I think your system of education definitely has a massive part to play in that, development and understanding of autonomy and freedom and sovereignty,
mm.
and very important aspects of life that we're just not exposed to over here.
I mean, that's really interesting. I mean, it sounds like the course in Italy. It's interesting because those topics you wouldn't necessarily put all together with fashion, which is really cool.
Yeah,
But
you
just,
wouldn't.
yeah, hearing you say that, I'm just reflecting on my education in the UK, and I feel like I definitely was, especially English, I would say, that question things, analyze things.
Mm.
Yeah, so I think, but then it's an interesting thing as well because even if that is what you're taught, it takes a whole different level to be able to live that. Do you know what I mean?
100%. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like, as we can see, still in Europe, there's yeah, there's still
I mean, I feel like the way it's a global phenomenon, isn't it? I don't think that you can say any country has tackled this better than any other. I think that you can very easily talk about, governments of countries that have tackled it far worse than others, without a doubt. When you talk about like Australia, France, for example, or China, of course, which has been
Canada.
horrible. But I do think on from like a global perspective, it's been kind of similar, where people all sort of rode the
Yeah.
wave, and there were a few, like misfits who were like, this doesn't sound right. And
Yes.
then I think everyone sort of there's been an ebb and a flow. And I
Mm.
think people are now in the flow, where they've realized that we don't need any of this shit. Like, we can look
Yeah.
after ourselves, we're fine.
I feel like recently I noticed that there's just a lot people. It seems to be a bit more people talking about it. Just the
Oh
past
yeah,
few years.
100%.
I feel like more people are kind of speaking. I've just noticed this recently that there's a lot of people speaking on this whole past few years nonsense.
Absolutely. I think that once we shut up, everyone else started talking.
Yeah, there's something happened, right?
Yeah. I think that I mean, honestly, there's so many different ways to describe this. I feel like if you think of it from an energetic perspective, we reached critical mass, which means that enough people woke up,
Yeah.
and that sort of sent like a wave of consciousness
Oh,
into the
yes.
collective,
The
and then everybody
wave.
started waking up. Yeah. So I like to look at it from that perspective. And also, I think that there was, when you shout information at people, it doesn't quite work, which is
Yeah.
which is what I've experienced personally in my life.
Yeah.
But like my mom, like this, it was very close to home for me, because my obviously my brothers and I were very against taking the jab and things like that. And my mom and dad went and did it anyway, and we were very upset with them, because it came from a place of love, and it came from a place of concern for your family, and we knew that there was something not right with what was going on. And now, 2 years later, my granny got the shot, my uncles got the shot, my parents got the shot, and 2 years later, my granny's passed away. She did never ever had a heart condition before getting the shot. As soon as she got it, her heart started failing. It was an absolute shit show. And at that time, I didn't even want to say anything, because I felt like
You knew.
I knew, we all knew, like my
Yeah.
brothers and I definitely knew. And we didn't want to say anything, because we didn't want to sort of like place blame, because it just wasn't the time for that.
It wasn't the
But
time. Yeah.
no, because I think what I realized over time is that everyone just did the best they could. Everyone was trying to help everyone. Everyone was trying to help their families. They were misinformed, unfortunately, which was a part of the agenda. But all in all, if you look at it from the larger perspective, it was a very special time, because all of humanity was trying to help each other. It was incredible. Even the people that weren't in agreement with our perspective they were doing incredible things for each other. They were, arranging all of these medicines that they thought at the time were the solutions to the problem. Eventually found out they were the bigger problem from the problem. But that's what I mean. I feel like it's a classic way of using people's emotions and their fear and feeding them with the wrong information and to their own detriment, when actually what everyone was doing was literally trying to help each other.
Yeah, literally.
Mm.
So how is it now? So after that, sorry to hear about your grand, that's crazy. How old was she?
She was old. She passed when she was 89 years old. She lived a full life. So, I mean, I think it just is what it is. My perspective on, on death has also evolved quite a
Yes.
lot lately,
Yeah.
where I don't think of it as an ending. I
Yeah.
know that she's around me. I know that, I can communicate with her if I want to. And I know that she'll always be a part of me, and she lived through me. Um, for the rest of my years. So it's obviously sad when anyone passes, because it's just the feeling of never having to see them again in this body, in this physical form. But what was very, I just think everything happens for a reason. And my uncle and my parents were able to see what happened to her
Oh, wow.
after it happened. So they were like, because I mean, they experienced it themselves as well. My mom, who historically has never, ever had any problems with immunity, never had a cold, never had a flu, ever, well, like through our entire childhood, we've never seen her be sick, started falling sick all the time. My uncle had the same thing. He suddenly, had like this array of issues that never existed at all before. So I think that,
Wow.
you can try to change someone's reality and contort it, even if to help them, but at the end of the day, everyone has to learn their own lessons in their own way, and there's
Yeah.
nothing you can do about it. You can
Yes.
plant the seed, but you can't control it.
That's so true. So what did they just get the first two? And then this all started happening?
Yeah, they got the first two, and then they were very scared of getting another one. They were just
Wow.
like, fuck that shit, it's not happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that must have happened to a lot of people. I've definitely
Hmm.
heard from friends. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like that's happened to a lot of people, but then I also know people who went and took a third and a fourth,
Yeah.
without any force. And that
Yes.
was just like, and I asked them, because I see, I've also reached a point where rather than like ridiculing someone for their decision, I just like to know the thought behind it. And I asked them, because these are all people that I consider intelligent, perceptive people. They may not have the same outlook on life as I do, but they're special and wonderful in their own way. So I wanted to know what compelled them to do that. And in fact, recently I spoke to one of my cousins who lives in Australia, and he just said to me, well, I just got a message on my phone saying it's time for your fourth shot. And I went and got it. And I was like, well, if you got a message on your phone saying it's time to go jump off a bridge, would you go do it? Like, how deeply conditioned are we? Because I was like, you recognized that there was an issue, right? After you took like the first three, you realized that I don't actually need this. This is not necessary for me. But the fact that you went and did it anyway is, in my opinion, just this very unrealistic, ridiculous belief and faith
Yeah.
in organizations
But
and
also, sorry.
administration, which is
Yeah.
crazy.
Also, it sounds like cognitive dissonance because it's like,
Yeah.
I know, but I'm still gonna.
Yeah. Yeah. Mass, that's what they call it, right? Mass formation psychosis.
Yes.
That's the study behind it. Yeah, but it's basically everyone sort of doing something. And although you're being bombarded now, there's so much information about, the reports, like Pfizer's reports about how detrimental this thing can be for you. And there's so much information about, all of the sudden deaths and the myocarditis and the pericarditis and the array of like menstrual and reproductive problems that are, happening as a
Mm.
result of taking this. And the fact that people are still unable to see it, I feel like one is a product of cognitive dissonance for sure, where they're just not able to assimilate the information because the conditioning is so powerful that they're not able to
Yeah.
break out of it. And for these
Yeah.
people, I truly hold so much space and have so much compassion and empathy for them, because I feel so bad that that is what they're going through. And then I think that there's another set of people um, that are just trapped in their own ego, you know. And I think until there's a dissolution of that ego, that feeling of I'm right, until it goes away, because I think the most transformational thing in all of our lives, you know, whatever you want to call us, the people that have, you know, been through some kind of awakening in their own lives, the biggest, most important part of that, like the most important step, was the dissolution of the ego,
Yeah,
was
totally.
realizing
Totally.
that I don't know anything.
Yeah, and I'm
I
not my
don't know
ego.
anything.
Yeah. Mm.
It's unnerving, you know, it's unnerving to be there. I feel like it's not fun, and not everybody wants to be there, and I get it. I fully get it. I feel like I remember the times when I was there feeling like my whole reality is crumbling before my eyes, and not having any grounding or any, you know, semblance of what is true and what isn't. Yeah, that wasn't fun.
Mm. Yeah, totally. It's yeah, fascinating really. So when did you, it sounds like you have definitely done a lot of digging into, connecting the dots and also recognizing the agenda, the bigger agenda at play. So when did all this happen? And I guess since after Italy, that obviously created this shift in the way that you are able to absorb information.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, can you just speak about?
So growing up, I feel like I was very apolitical. I was very like hippie, like I don't care about what's going on in the world. It doesn't affect me and all of this. And I really enjoyed being like that, to be honest. It was great. It was a really fun time in my life. And then when I was in Italy, I was still like that. And I'd never ever forget this, because I know that it was my catalyst for awakening, and for that I will be forever thankful.
Wait, so
Um,
say that again?
I said I'll never ever forget what my catalyst for
Ah,
my awakening was, and I'll forever be thankful for it. It was very strange, but I think a lot of people sort of went through this at the same time. Where I remember there was so much talk about. This was during the election, during the election of Trump and Hillary, and it was, I think, 2018 at the time. And I wasn't really reading the newspapers or anything like that, but there was a lot of chatter, as there is a lot of bullshit chatter that was like in my purview. That was like making its way into my subconscious without me even realizing it. And I didn't really have any perspective on it, to be honest, because I didn't know anything about it. But I always felt like, I know a lot of people were talking about how Trump was really horrible, but I always felt like Hillary was a witch. Like, I don't know,
mm,
there was just something about her
yeah.
that just like irked me, like really unnerved me. And so I didn't really think too much of it. But I remember coming back, and I met my older brother, who's 5.5 years older than I am. He's great. He's always been like a sort of like spiritual guide for me.
Oh,
And
wow.
I went and met him when I came back, and I said, so where it seems like we're on the cusp of World War III. And he, and he was like, oh yeah. And he was like, oh wow, what is this information that you're aware of that none of us are aware of, you know, like what's going on? And I was like, no, I feel like, isn't everybody saying that Trump is going to start World War III? And he just looked at me and laughed, and he was like, who's everyone? And I was like, I don't know, just like everyone around me. And he was like, have you heard him say that? And I was like, no. And he said, have you heard him say anything? And I said, no. And then he said, so where are you getting your information from? So I said, just from, you know, other sources, like the media's perspective on it, or like people's perspective on it. And all he said to me was, he said, just sit down and do your own research. And that's all. He didn't give me any perspective. He didn't give me any information. He didn't tell me, yes, no, you're right, you're wrong. None of that. He was just like, you know
Wow.
what? Figure it out for yourself. He was like, what you're saying is bizarre. So sit down and figure it out for yourself. And
It's
I did.
powerful.
Yeah, I did do exactly that, actually. And it was insane. The kind of stuff that I found out just by sitting religiously every day at my laptop and researching as though my life depended on it was insane. And
Wow.
that was obviously a time where YouTube and all of these, you know, um, uh, platforms had a lot of independent information as well. Now they're completely controlled, so it's very
Mm,
difficult to actually get to the good stuff.
mm.
But at that time, it was very easy to dig. And the first major rabbit hole that I went down that completely disintegrated my idea of reality was the satanic abuse of children. And it just shattered me. It was like nothing I'd ever read, seen, or experienced or known in my life before. I just felt like I was so naive, and I was living in this like world of like, roses and butterflies, and it was nothing like that. And I must have probably read and watched like over 500 testimonials of like children and adults that had been abused, and that had been, that had been through some kind of ritualistic abuse. I also read about the immense propensity with which these pedophilic rings have their hold on society, from the companies that we're buying products from. All of these systems are fueling money and resources into this disgusting global practice. And it just shattered me. I think I think I've cried more in those 5 months of research than I ever have in my entire life. Like, I would just wake up and not be able to get out of bed because
Wow.
I was just helpless. I would wake up and think that this is what's happening to children in my world. And I'm deeply connected to children. I always have been. And I felt like, if this is what's happening to children in my world, I don't deserve to be happy. Like, I don't deserve to wake up and go to work and have a life and have a relationship and have this like lovely family and these opportunities. I was like, what is the meaning of all of this? And what, like, nothing means anything if this is what is happening. And it was very, very dark. It was a very dark time. I feel like I was easily depressed for months on end. I wouldn't get out of my house, meet anyone, speak to anyone. I would just read all the time. I was just reading and assimilating information all the time. And then one day I had to just shut everything and stop reading about everything altogether. And because it went from like one rabbit hole to another, to another, to another, to another, which was very helpful, because it went from like like the child sacrifice and the pedophilia, to what governments are doing, to their involvement in it, to following the money, to the central banking system, to how the corporations own the governments, to how people are being subjugated, to how people are a part of these practices without even knowing it. We're a part of this like ritualistic demonic systems, just in the way that we invest. Even our money makes a big difference, because our money is a source of energy at the end of the day. So it was crazy. It was just like volleying from one thing to another, to another. And it was very difficult. I mean, I'm not going to lie, it was a very, very difficult time. It wasn't just hard for me, it was very traumatic for my relationship as well. I was seeing this very lovely guy, who is a dear friend now, who's from London, who I moved to London to live with. And it was horrible for our relationship, for me going through that while he was unable to understand or empathize with what was happening with me. He was
Wow.
just like, I think you're going crazy. He was like, I legitimately think that you're going to need help, because he was like, this is nuts. He's like, all you want to read about is this, all you want to talk about is this. You don't want to like get out and live your life, and you feel like you have some kind of incumbent duty that nobody else in the world sees or understands. And he was like, I'm worried for you. And eventually I was able to pull myself out of it. It took some time, but I was able to completely do that. But I do think that it was very important that that happened to me. It was very, very important, because my whole attitude of like frivolousness and like, oh, I don't care about anything and nothing affects me, like while I was growing up, oh, I'm apolitical and blah 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 and all of this stuff, it went away completely. Suddenly I was there. I was present in that moment, and it did affect me. It was important to me. What was happening in the world was important to me. And being an agent of change in any way I could became my number one priority. In that moment, I was like, whatever I do, this is my divine purpose. And it's unshaken. It's I don't think it'll ever go away.
Mm. Wow, love that story. I mean, I feel like that is part of the awakening because it's dark. My friend calls it the big
Yeah,
fat ugly truth.
it is
It's
absolutely.
dark and it's the truth. And so we have to go there. We have to experience. We have to feel it. We have to know to really, if you really want to know truth, then that is it. And how we handle it is dependent on, like, I guess what you were saying earlier, those bigger philosophies that will help us to, really ground it so that we can really understand the why behind it.
Absolutely. And I think when I was younger, obviously this was three, 4 years ago now. 4 years ago now, I think, when I just started like opening up to this information.
Mm.
And yeah, I do think that at that time I just didn't have the mechanisms to
Yes,
deal with that kind of information. I wasn't
yes,
evolved enough as a being to be able to deal with that information. And I think that the philosophy and being rooted in understanding
yeah,
what reality is,
yeah,
what karmic imprints are, what our world is, the duality, the illusion, the delusion,
yeah.
all of that, the recognition of all of that completely obviously evolved my perspective on what's happening. And it gave me the strength to fight it. It empowered me to actually do something about it, and not to just like sit in my bed and cry and feel like, I'm
Yes.
hopeless and the world, like I'm helpless in the world.
Well, this is it. It's because what's happening is it's spiritual, and so it's so practical and physical as well. Like
Hmm.
the poop demic, and the lockdowns, But at the same time, there is something else going on here. But
Absolutely.
when did you when was this when you went down the rabbit holes?
So this was in, I think, 2018. This was 2018, early 2019, 2018,
Yeah.
2019. Yeah, maybe more 2018. And yeah, what I did realize is that we are absolutely bang in the midst of spiritual warfare. And the way to take up arms in spiritual warfare is strengthening and connecting with your own spirit. That's the only way to do it, because um, I don't remember who said this, but it will stay with me forever. Protect your souls, because we're in a place where souls get eaten.
Yes,
Mhm.
I love that.
Yeah, I love that as
Love
well. I don't
that.
remember where I heard it, but it resonated with me so deeply. And I was like, you know what? My entire focus actually needs to be exactly that. I need to protect myself before I can do anything about anything else.
I mean, yeah, obviously it's a process, and I feel like sometimes we might go through all these different emotions through really seeing what's happening. But I think this is such an important thing, and people are always coming to me saying what to do, what should we do, and I just feel like it's actually really simple and basic, and actually that is it. You just need to go within, and have that
Absolutely.
connection to source, and that it's so strange because people a lot of the time think we need to fight, we need to do this, we need to act,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, honestly, I feel like we've all been there, and we've come to the conclusion. And there, again, there's a beautiful line in the Gita which expresses this incredibly, which it says that once we're able to remove ourselves from the quagmire of delusion, only then can we see truth. And the quagmire of delusion is literally everything around us. Yeah, so I just thought that was a beautiful line, and it's true, because honestly, all of the information that we're talking about is all imprinted in our own DNA.
Oof.
It's just about recognizing it. It's
Yeah.
just about going inside, connecting to source, connecting. What is source? Source is the deepest part of the self. That is source. That is God. That is, the supreme, as we call it. So, and the supreme has all of the knowledge. So I think that the more that we're excavating the knowledge that's given to us by these fragmented media sources, I mean, I think there's some amount of that has to happen. It's a part of the evolution. But I think at some point you disconnect from that, and you
Mm,
just start going inward for the answers. Like,
mm,
even
mm.
lately, when it comes to Ukraine and Russia, like the newer sort of
Yeah.
upheavals that they're creating within the world, monkeypox, all of this dumb shit. um, I think, what rather than like looking up like a lot of information about it, I just internalized it, because I was like, I've gotten to a point in my life where deliberately strengthen my intuition. It's a practice that I do every single moment of my life as much as I can. And I know that that is the part of me that's connected to God. And if I have questions, who better to ask than God?
Love that.
Mm.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the way forwards. What? So, did you, when you went down the rabbit hole, did you speak to your brother again?
Oh, yes, so much. I feel like I don't even know what I would have done without him,
Wow.
because having him and his wife, they were my immediate family and support system. And
Mm,
they were, exposed to the same kind of information. So it was paramount having them, because they were a big, big part of my evolution and a big part of me not going completely crazy, to be honest. Because
mm,
when I started speaking to my boyfriend at the time, or my friends, or anybody about it, they were just like, dude, you, my friend, are batshit crazy. And I think a lot of people got told that, but because I've always considered my older brother extremely intelligent, extremely perceptive, he's always been, that sort of person in my life. I knew that he was sort of like, he was my voice of reason in some sense, where if I was unable to, if I was sometimes, convoluted by outside perspective, I would sit and break down information with him. And even within our conversations, our nuanced approaches to situations are very different, which is brilliant. I think that he's able to deal with things in his own way, and I'm able to deal with things in my own way. And we're both perceptive in our own, we have our strengths and weaknesses, and they're different from each other. So when we speak to each other, we don't agree on everything, which is great, because then we're able to challenge perspectives within perspectives, And I think that that's a misconception people have, that there's this umbrella or blanket of information, and then everybody within that blanket agrees with everything each other say, when that's not the case at all. I mean, we're individual human beings at the end of the day, um, we're so nuanced and so detailed in our own understanding and our own conditioning, our own programming, our own mannerisms, that our thoughts can never be identical to another's. And
mm,
that's why I don't like being put, like categorized as anything at all. I just
mm-mm.
like being me.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I feel like that is also the way the truth works. It's not like, it's just not black and white. And I
Mm.
feel like these past few years, if it showed us anything, is that it's not black and white.
It's not black and white. It's
Yeah.
definitely not printed in black and white, because that is some bullshit.
What do you mean?
I mean, our newspapers have been so
Ah,
rubbish.
yeah, yeah,
Like, I mean,
yeah.
I open it. So the only thing that my newspapers I use for at home now is to like clean my dog's pee. And I think it's just such a brilliant metaphor for like life, I think that is where the news should go.
Love that. That's so good that you had your brother that you could turn to, because yeah, especially if people were calling you crazy, like that's
Yeah,
yeah, that's really really good.
yeah.
What so what happened after this moment then? So you managed to find it and then you moved back to India? Or
So I was already in India
ah,
when I was sort of like exposed to this
okay.
information, when I was having this upheaval. And then I was here for a little bit, and then I moved to London, and
Ah,
I moved there to be with my boyfriend at the time, and that didn't unfortunately work out. I mean, not unfortunately. I don't think anything is unfortunate anymore. Actually, I think everything happened exactly as it is meant to, because in that moment, that felt like the worst thing ever. Like, oh my God, I love him so much, and it's not happening. It's not working out. We're not together. And then I came back, and we actually broke up when I was already in India. And, I think that when you're experiencing these things, especially if you're not aware of the bigger plan, they feel so real, and they feel like they're completely like shaking your reality, and you don't know what life is going to be after that, because there's such like transcendental change, and I
yeah.
think that when you're able to retrospectively look at it, you know that everything just happened exactly as it was meant to. Like, I was meant to be in India now. I was meant to be by myself, because this journey that I've undergone was a completely individualistic journey. I had to do it on my own. I could not do it with anybody else. I wouldn't have never been able to do it with anyone as I could do it by myself. And I think that it was so important for me to be in this moment now, that everything just has just worked out exactly as it should. I've never been happier.
Mm. So when you came back, you basically, there was more discovery. There was more. Oh, that.
Oh yeah. So when I came back, the best thing about coming back, to be honest, was the connections that I made when I came back. So I
Mm,
started like posting on Instagram, and there was no intent. There was no like, like overarching intent that, oh, I want to like do something with this or whatever. Like, as people who get into it to do the influencer thing or whatever, do it with that intent. There was nothing like that. It was just that I want to put out information, and I want to challenge perspectives, and I
mm,
want to you know, make people a little bit uncomfortable,
yeah.
break them out of their preconceived notions, and see if they resonate with it. It's all right if they don't, but that was the idea with which I started. And yeah, it was just this beautiful synergy by which I got acquainted with this incredible group of people that are in Bombay and that are within India, who
Wow.
are all on the same journey, and who have all had, been through this awakening in their own way,
Mm.
and come to their own conclusions, and sort of like magnetized towards each other. And yeah, it was like reconnecting with my soul family. It feels like that, like I have
Mm.
such deep love for these people, and I don't even know them very well. Most of them.
Yeah, there's definitely been a lot of that happening. It's amazing. It's just,
Yeah,
when you can just be authentic and then
yeah,
people can find
exactly.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's great. I feel like we were meant to find each other, because we were meant to be a big part of propelling each other to do this work together.
Mm.
It's not work that you can do alone, and it's not work that you can do competitively.
Yes.
It's a collaborative effort, and it's so beautiful because it's just so easy. Like, when I see them, it's lovely. Like, I'm happy for them. I'm happy for all of their successes. I want them to do really well. I want them to succeed at whatever they're doing. There's no sense of like, oh, is this person doing this better than me? Or, like all of these like 3D feelings of like, what is better, what is worse, and like the feelings of lack, they've just
Yes.
left. And I feel like there's
Mm.
just we've arrived into this space of abundance where there's space for everyone to do their work, and it's beautiful, and I'm so appreciative of it, because I know that without one person doing what they have to, another person doing what they have to, my work becomes intangible.
Mm.
It's really, really important that this all sort of comes together in this perfect synergy, and that's exactly what's happening.
That's so cool. But yeah, I guess this is like separate to your job. This is like the soul work.
Yeah, this is the soul work, but I feel like lately, so I worked in fashion for 5 years, and then in high street fashion. Then I realized that I don't like it at all. Like, I
Wow.
realized that it just wasn't my cup of tea, because it was so maligned by animosity and greed, and this feeling of like extreme competition and extreme reliance on just these like very I don't know, these like physical structures that I wasn't uh, resonating with anymore at all. And it became difficult for me. Like, started making me feel very empty to be part of that industry that functioned like that. So I got into organic food, which is basically my parents started this brilliant company called the Organic Garden when about 10 years ago, when organic food wasn't even a thing in India.
Wow.
And yeah, they were like among the trailblazers in the field. It was amazing, and I was always very keen on it, because we've been eating organic food for the past decade, and I know that it's changed our health as a family a lot, even our cognitive development. Like, I felt my brain change through like the subtraction of chemicals in my body, that I think it's made a massive difference. um, so yeah, I was always very passionate about the purpose, but I never took it up before 2021, which is when I was like, I can't do the fashion thing anymore, so I'm going to see if I can like market this, because it's very important to me for people to understand what organic food is and why it's necessary and what soil regeneration is, because that is the future. Like, people need to, the more people start eating organic, and I'm not saying, come to my company and everybody eat from organic garden. That was not the point of it. The point was to put information out there so that everybody in this space, like, starts making real waves within the industry, because that was very necessary. And while that is happening, there was always a part of me that just told me that I need to, in some way, shape, or form, go back to fashion. I don't know why. It's just like this. It's like this. I can feel it. Like, I can feel it when it's a mind thing. I can feel it when it's a body thing, and I can feel it when it's a soul thing. And this was a communication from my own spirit. And it was telling me, what, you're doing all of this, which is great in the interim, and you're learning a lot, and that's fine. But your purpose now is to infiltrate fashion and to disrupt it in the way that you think it should be. Which is why I'm currently actually working on a fashion brand, which is set to launch very soon, by the end of the month, the beginning of next month. And the idea is to use design and creativity to put out concepts of truth and love and revolution and the awakening, and what it means to be one, what it means to be a collective, what it means to be interconnected. Put out all of these messages into the world. And I think it is the future. I think conversation, discourse is the future. We need to start talking to each other about these incredibly transcendental concepts so that they just become a part of our norm. It is a way to raise the collective consciousness. It is a way to transcend the ages. It's just, I just think that is, I felt more authentic and more like myself working on this brand than I ever have doing any work in my life. So I'm super, super excited about it. And the more I work on it, the more I started realizing that, at least for me, my purpose and my work can't be two separate entities.
Yes.
They need to be one. It needs to be the same thing. That there needs to be like a thread that ties through it. And I read what you put up recently as well, which I found beautiful, where you spoke about music and how music affects your mind and affects your behavior and affects people and populations and surroundings and circumstances at large. And I think that that's a part of your purpose, and you so beautifully tied it into your life. And I think the more and more people start awakening to their own purpose and realizing why they were put on this planet, the more beautiful, the more beauty and happiness and peace we're going to see very, very soon.
I love that. I feel like, when you create your own thing, it's just fun. You're just doing what you want in the way you like to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's so cool. I'm looking forward to seeing more with that.
I'm I'll come by to London and, have like all of my friends in London try it out and have like a photo shoot there. I'm very excited because it's very important for me for this to be a global movement for me, because it's not something that's limited to India. It's not something that we're experiencing as Indians. We're experiencing this as a global population.
That's
you know?
true. Yeah. Yeah. So, how do you see it now? Like, so just now with regards to like what's been happening since 2020, you did share a bit already with like your parents, and again, it's so cool. You have your brothers, I think you said, but yeah, it's always good to have support,
It is, yeah, massively.
Yeah. What It's mad. I just think so much has happened since 2020. It's
So
crazy.
much has happened. Yeah, it's been crazy. I think it's been great, to be honest. I feel like it was sad in the start because a lot of people suffered the pandemic very deeply, and including from any social strata. It didn't actually matter. Like, everybody had
Yes.
their own trials and tribulations, whether it was mental health issues or whether it was financial, economical problems. There were problems on every level. So I do think that, I could feel all of that at that time. But I think that in 2022, in the now, that has changed massively. And a lot of people that you speak to will speak very positively of their graph from the beginning to the end of this whole lockdown, or, whatever, because people got a chance to work on themselves. People got a chance to really go inward, to, take up a hobby, to connect to a very special part of themselves that they probably lost along the way. So and that's why there's this brilliant line which I absolutely love, which is, they tried to cause a pandemic, and they ended up causing the Great Awakening, because that's exactly what happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, where do you feel like now and moving forwards, what do you see unfolding, and or what do you think is important? Any thoughts?
So I feel like moving forward, obviously there is if you read about Agenda 2030, or you read about the Great Reset, so all of that is definitely in action. It's already in play, where we're able to see snippets of it through, they've just successfully cloned an Arctic fox in China. And although I don't personally think that that's the first successful clone, to be honest, but I think that it was important to put that into culture, because that's obviously going to now metastasize into something else. And the transhumanist agenda is everywhere. We're already seeing people being microchipped. We're seeing the social credit score in China starting to, make its way into like pockets of other countries, which is very scary. We're also seeing the introduction of central bank digital currencies as cryptocurrencies, which is very scary, because in that way it ties into the social credit score. So if you hold that money as your main digital currency, based on your behavior and based on what is approved and not approved, like you and I having this conversation right now, could deplete our money. Like the bank could take it away, saying that we don't approve of what you're talking about. And it's just it's a very scary like part, agenda of control, and of taking away our power and replacing it with these like AI robotic people. There's also a lot of talk suddenly about UFOs, which is going to be fascinating. I wonder what they're going to do with that. Because, I mean, we've been talking about UFOs and aliens and all of these things for years and years now, and being called crazy. But now the CIA says that, oh, actually, aliens do exist. No, actually, yeah, maybe we're going to make contact with them at some point. Not that we haven't, obviously, but yeah, it's just interesting to see the development of these narratives and where they take them, because I don't think enough of the world is really aware, like we discussed, of the overarching agenda. They're able to see the bits and parts, but they're not able to piece it together. Which is a vulnerability at our end as a people. But I do think that, so again, when things seem out of your control in the physical, I always like to, look at it from an energetic perspective. And if you look at it from an energetic perspective, you realize that the best thing that every single one of us can do is literally to raise our own frequency. Because when you raise your own frequency, when you're moving from the alpha to the omega state, and when you're closer to the expanded states rather than the contracted states, you actually counterbalance a lot of people that are in the contracted states, as we've experienced now. So many people have suddenly woken up to this reality, who were completely against the things that we were talking about. And why has that happened? That's happened because we authentically grounded into whatever we needed to, and sort of like raised our own frequencies, and that had a collective impact. So I think that the only thing that we can actually really do, number one, from an energetic perspective, is that work on yourself every single day, all the time, because there is no bigger project than you. And that will just be a forever thing. Um, Secondly, a big part of the how to sort of replicate that in the physical world is just go back to the basics. Learn to live like your ancestors did. Learn to farm. Learn to preserve food. Learn to grow your own vegetables, grow your own, have your own sort of like create your own, build your own structures, have your own energy sources, whether that's, figuring out how to invest in solar energy. And, although I'm not the biggest fan of the current renewable sources of energy, because I know that they're very depleted compared to what we can have in terms of like electromagnetic energy and like these incredible concepts that haven't been allowed to make their way into our reality. I do think that it's very important to be able to harness these natural sources of our natural resources in many ways. Um, yeah, so it's very important, sustainable building, changing the way that we consume as a population, cleaning up our food, learning to invest in organic, learning to be part of these regenerative practices that actually help the earth transform, because that's how we're going to do it. That's how we're going to replicate it through all of the dimensions and through all of the realms, because it is our responsibility to do that, whether or not we understand it. It's only up to us, because we're all that's there.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, all of it requires, all of what you said is requiring responsibility,
Yeah.
ultimately. But
Radical responsibility. I think that is the name of the game for the future. We're
yes,
done. You can't blame anything
yes,
on anyone anymore. You
yeah,
can't, you can't be a victim anymore. That time is over, because it's
yeah,
not serving you at all. It's never going to serve you again. To be honest, there was those 2 years where, the whole world was going crazy and everybody was very rooted into their victim hood,
yeah,
and it was sort of being encouraged by the media and
yeah.
culture and all of that. And that'll keep happening. But I think a lot of people have realized that it's very important to transcend from that,
Hmm.
and just take responsibility for what's happening in your life.
Yeah, totally. It's time to move forwards from that.
Absolutely.
Nice. Thank you for sharing that. I just wanted to mention, because you were talking about the digital currency and control, there was something that happened recently with PayPal in the US. I don't know if you heard about
Mm-hmm.
it. Mad. They basically changed their policy and they started to
Mm-hmm.
say, like, if you are basically spreading misinformation, they
I
have the
read about
right,
that.
yeah, to
Yeah,
take away $2,500 from your PayPal account.
that's
And then
crazy.
they turned around because people started kicking up a fuss, and then they turned around and said, "Oh, sorry, it was a mistake. Mistake." Yeah, like, oh, it wasn't supposed to be there. Like, what? Crazy.
No, I mean, there's definitely going to be a massive pushback. There's this
Yeah.
movement called Go Woke, Go Broke. And there's a reason that it's gained so much momentum, is because no one's going to accept this shit. At the end of the day, people are good, hardworking people, barely scraping through, trying to make a living. And if you're going to tell them that you're going to morally police them and take away their money, their assets, they're going to be like, fuck you. And
Yeah.
that's absolutely right. I mean, whoever it is, whatever the agenda behind it, you can't infringe on people. They already infringed on our rights, they infringed on our
Mhm.
humanity, they infringed on our sovereignty, our autonomy. But I think people are far more concerned with money.
Yeah, that's
So
true, though.
you infringe on people's money and they're going to fuck your shit up.
Yeah, I think that's true, though. Um, what was I gonna say? Yeah, so are you hopeful for what's to come? It's obviously a massive transformation. The tumbling down is happening right now, but
Hmm.
yeah.
Honestly, I don't know if I'm an optimistic fool or like what you want to call me, but I fully am. I I've always been a lover of life. I love life, and I love everything that comes with it, whether it's the challenges, whether it's the sorrows, whether it's the anything that comes in the form of an intense experience, whether it's good or bad. I've always found reason to love it and to not just endure it, but like live it. And I think that I'm very fortunate to be around people with very similar perspective, who know how to enjoy life even through all of the craziness, and who are very well aware of what's happening around us, but are still able to, like, let it go for like let it go and sort of focus on their own development as well, and like stream back into it and out of it. And I think that's necessary. So yeah, I'm perennially hopeful, always. I think that I think I don't even know if hope is the right word for it. I just feel like we're gonna do it.
Yeah.
We're gonna do something. I don't think that we're gonna so easily be beaten, because if we really think about the numbers, although they have a lot of the occult information and knowledge that we're not privy to,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But I think that even this, like, pockets of people gaining recognition of who they really are and grounding within themselves and their own purpose, I do think that there is something that I can feel on a very, very, very big magnitude that's happening. There's a
Yeah.
massive shift that we're undergoing, and I think it's going to be brilliant. I'm very excited to see what the future holds.
Yeah, totally.
Mm.
It is exciting. And yeah, do you have anything to share? Because I feel like what you described earlier, when you really went down the rabbit hole, and it was such a shock to really recognize that what the darkness, the levels of darkness that's taking place in the world. And I feel like that is part of the process. Do you have anything to share with anyone else who might be just discovering that now?
If I think of, if would there be anything that could pacify me at the time that I was experiencing that? Yeah, there would be. I think number one is like communication, companionship. If you have a circle of people that are open to understanding you or empathizing with you, I think that there's nothing that can compare to that. Obviously, having a support system. But obviously, for a lot of people, those support systems aren't very easily available. And I've experienced that a lot. A lot of people write to me on my Instagram saying they feel very lonely and very isolated going through this alone. And I know that that is a part of the journey as well. But I do think that taking to philosophy has helped me massively. I do think that, reading about Stoicism, reading about um, Sanatan Dharma, anything about the Vedas, about the Bhagavad Gita, about any stories of awakening, even about like entheogenic plants, whether it's a Terence McKenna or like an alternate history, whether it's a Graham Hancock. I think just acquiring information that's positive and goes against the norm in some way.
Mm.
I think when you start reading about these brilliant people who are, scientists and philosophers and astrologers talking about things that the mainstream narrative doesn't consider real, when you hear these people talk about that stuff, you're like, you know what? These people are actually brilliant. They have done so much study, like years and years of study in their field of research. And if they're saying that what we're being told is incorrect, then yeah, lots of shit is incorrect.
Yeah.
And I think this entire reality that's been simulated for us, it's an illusion. And once you break the illusion, it can never recreate itself. It's just done. It's brilliant. And that's my favorite part of it. Once you are awake forever, eternally. You're never going back to sleep. You're there. You're already there. Your frequency is there. The rest of you will get there.
Mm. I love that. Yeah. And then even from there's so much. There's just so much to be discovered.
There's so much to be discovered. That's life, and it's great. And I'm so happy that we have each other to talk about these things with and share these perspectives with,
Yeah.
because it's such a brilliant part of being a human, being able to communicate with each other. And
Mm.
it's my favorite part of life, and I
Yeah.
really, really hope that we never lose that. It's so integral to to our development as a species.
I love that. I feel like I've always felt that way from a very young age. Like I love speaking to people, learning from people, hearing their stories, just learning from their upbringing, and it's interesting because I feel like this past 2 years it has, in a way, it has taken up. I think people got a bit comfortable with like not really going out as much and all sorts. It's crazy. So like
Yeah.
maybe they're trying. But especially when speaking about this journey, I feel like it's so important because there's so many stigmas, and in a way it feels like sometimes you can't speak. But it's
Mm-hmm.
like, no, let's talk about, and like you said earlier, let's make it normal.
Yeah. Let's make it normal. I feel like that's been my biggest and that is a part of my journey for sure, is to normalize these conversations
Yeah.
and to normalize these topics, and to be like, well, if this is not what if this is not what you want to talk about, then what do you want to talk about? Like dumb shit like the financial system, which is always a fucking mess. Like, what do you want to say? There's the world is so full of magic and beauty. I feel like if you're just able to see everything through the eyes of a mystic,
Ooh.
everything just becomes beautiful, and that's the life I want to live, and that's what I want to talk about, and that's what I want to that's the reality that I want to envision for us as a planet as well, just magic.
Yes, more magic. Love it. So, thank you so much. Amazing to
Thank
hear
you for
about your
having
journey.
me.
Yeah.
I loved having this chat with you. It was really,
Mm,
really fun.
yeah.
Um, I definitely will come to London. I'll definitely see you at some point in
Yes.
time in person when we actually do know each other and we're not
Yeah.
just like random people.
But I'm also probably going to be in Bombay at some point as well. So,
Really? Okay, that would be very exciting. Definitely hit me up. I
yeah.
can't wait. I can't wait.
Aw. Yeah, I
This has
love
been great,
India.
Jess. Thank you so much for having me.
So, I do like to just finish on this one question,
Hmm.
and that is, what does freedom mean to you?
Ooh,
Big one.
big one. Yeah. Um, so I feel like I've never been free.
Woo!
I've thought about freedom in my own life, and I've never been free. What I thought was freedom when I was a child was just a cage within a cage. And then every time I got out of one cage, I realized actually I'm in an even bigger cage. And then I got out of that cage, I realized I'm in an even bigger cage. And then eventually I realized, you know what? I'm just in a freaking zoo, and I can get out of one cage and another, but am I ever actually free? So I've never ever felt free before now, before like this year and this moment, where I feel like I'm finally free because I've been able to free my mind in a way, and I think that the shackles aren't just physical, and they're not just on our physiological self. They're obviously, our minds are enslaved, and the ultimate freedom is to free yourself from what the system tells you, is to free yourself from what society tells you, and to not give a flying fuck. That is my ultimate freedom mantra. Just do what you got to do, stay rooted and grounded to your purpose, and don't give a flying fuck what anyone else thinks. And it will be the freest you've ever felt in your entire life.
Mm, love that. Yeah, I feel like I could see that because you've definitely been expressing yourself really honestly online. So, but it is an amazing feeling.
It's great, yeah. And the thing is, I've gotten to a point where I think people expect it from me. So a lot of people
Mm,
ask me, do you get hate? And do you get like, people fighting with you and things like that? And it used to happen initially. It doesn't happen anymore because people just know who I am now. They're just like, that's what she is and that's what she believes in. And we're not going to fuck around because there's just no point in it. And I'm
yeah,
really glad to be here.
I love that. It's so interesting. It's really cool though. Just give you the space to do it.
Yeah.
And
And
also,
that's why it's so important to be authentic,
yes.
is because once you're authentic, no one can shake your center.
Also, it's like you're grounded in this is my message, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like the most important thing is, you know what, share your perspective and just don't care what anyone thinks about it. There's some people that will love it, there's some people that will despise you for it, and there's some people that will be sort of neutral, think you're a bit of a quack, and just it is what it is, you know. You
Yeah.
can't be too bothered. You just have to like do your own thing and go along your own way and try to fight with as few people as you possibly can.
Mhm. Definitely. I love that. It's it can be hard, I think, definitely, but I feel like that's the journey. That's how we rise into this authenticity and the responsibility. You just
Mm-hmm.
can't, you cannot be like offended by all of that.
No, absolutely not. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you. So good to hear your
Thank you,
story
Jess.
of your rising. Yeah.
It's been great. Thank you. I mean, I feel like I haven't spoken about these things to anyone in a very long time.
Wow.
Yeah, it was like reliving these things for me as well, which is great, which is
Mm.
really fun. Yeah,
Amazing.
watching my own journey, you know?
Yeah. Yes. Recalibrating.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. Cool. I'll put
Thank
your
you,
links
Jess.
below and everything. Sweet.
Perfect. Lots of love.
Thank
See you
you.
soon. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for listening to this episode and to this podcast. We hope that you can gain many insights through the art of listening. If you haven't already, we would love it if you can follow us on YouTube, on Instagram, and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts if that feels right for you. We've also just launched our first online course, Awakening 101, a ninja's guide to navigating your spiritual awakening, which is led by me and is offered via donation. So if you feel called to that, then please dive in. It's available via our website. Thank you.